Hey everyone, thank you for being here. I am Gorish. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Sybill. Today I have Collin Mayjack with me, who runs product marketing here. Later you are going to hear from Meredith Chandler, who is the VP of Sales at Aligned, and Elaine Zelby, who is the co-founder and CRO at Tofu HQ. Both of them are Sybill customers, and they're going to show you today how they use Sybill to run their day-to-day, especially at their companies. Imagine it's Wednesday afternoon. You pull up a deal in your pipeline. It's stage 4, close date is next month. Last activity was logged like 2 days ago. You have your legal review, which is on the calendar. Everything looks hunky-dory and nothing is flagged anywhere. And by every signal that your data is capturing, this deal is going great. But something in the deal that the data does not tell you is that your champion, who's actually been the person that is driving this internally, hasn't said a word in last 11 days. A pricing objection which came up in week 3 just got a nod and then never got resolved. The CFO quietly joined the last one. Nobody prepped for that. Nobody adjusted it. And so what a human looking at that deal, especially the rep running it, should understand that the deal isn't really healthy. It might actually be slipping, especially because of the pricing gap and the objection, but nothing in your stack is able to know and tell you that difference. And look, this might look like a hypothetical deal that I made up for this talk, but I'd bet real money that most people in this deal have some version of this kind of deal in the last 90 days alone. So actually, let's find out, when is the last time a deal slipped and you genuinely didn't see that coming? I would love if you can drop it in the chat about the last time that happened to you.
Yeah. And while people write out their answers, I actually have a story from a customer that I heard last week that I'll share real quick. I was chatting with an AE who was recently working like a massive account. Like this would have been probably her biggest deal ever. She was brought into the deal late. Everything looks like it's humming along. It's going well until the very last minute, the prospect says, hey, actually, we're just going to outsource this whole thing. So making the software that she was selling redundant and therefore not needed. And so naturally she was like very shocked. And up until that point, she hadn't really been using Sybill. So she decided to run like a post-mortem in Sybill and be like, hey, what actually happened? And just to see if she was missing something. And sure enough, Sybill caught this little offhanded throwaway comment the prospect had said a while back that mentioned that they had already committed to outsourcing and they were just evaluating her product as like a backstop. And it was like clear as day. Sybill captured it. Like it was like play the exact meeting, exact person who said it. And so all that time, energy, effort was thrown to this deal that was from day one really not going to be going anywhere. And she called it this like career changing moment because it took her from seeing Sybill as just this, oh, great, another tool that management is asking me to use, to a tool that she said she would pay for out of her own pocket if her company didn't. Anyway, kind of a wild story.
I think it's not a rare thing. It happens to the best of us. And the biggest thing that bugs me is right now we have a decade of tools, close to 2 decades of tools that are trying to solve this deal slippage problem with more dashboards, more data, more activity logging. But it just hasn't been fixed. It's like we have so much more visibility than ever before, and we cannot still tell when a deal is going the wrong direction. And it always comes off as a sudden shock in many, many scenarios. And essentially, what happens is we've solved the wrong problem with software to date.
So here's kind of our assessment of what's happened. If you rewind a bit, like 2019, 2020, 2021, SaaS companies heard sales leaders effectively saying, hey, I can't see what's happening in my deals. And so what did we get? We got call recording, we got conversation intelligence, we got activity tracking, we got really pretty pipeline dashboards, we got CRM integrations. You're getting all your calls transcribed, emails threaded, all these state changes are logged. That basically all the SaaS vendors responded with more visibility than we had ever had before. The problem is, more often than not, those tools still couldn't answer kind of the real questions about what's moving revenue. So they can't tell you, is this deal healthy or is it just active? Like you got to reply. Does this champion have actual authority or are they just really enthusiastic about the product? Is this a small objection or is this one that is going to blow up the deal a month from now? Somehow we solved this. We solved a problem, but we solved the wrong problem. And that's because these tools, they show you activity, but they don't really deeply understand your deals. So like the real context, the stuff that actually will tell you whether a deal's going to close or not, it's in all these subtleties, like the subtle hesitation over here. It's the competitive timing over there, or like a comment that this prospect said here, maybe what they didn't say. All these things are signals that nobody really logs and weren't just popping out to us in dashboards or transcripts. And what we've kind of done since then is in the last couple months in particular, people have tried to take all those same inputs, just drop them into AI, cross their fingers and hope that AI will figure it out. But it's not working because underneath it, it is still just a data repository. It's just a database. It's not a kind of cohesive memory or a sense of reasoning for how your team wins. So you don't get feedback on like actual wins and losses. You don't get like dots connected across conversations on why your team is winning. It's just a lot of records. So put another way, if you run AI on a set of records, what you are going to get is faster retrieval of records. You're not going to get understanding of how you win deals. And I think to get out of the jargon for a second, I think we intuitively know this. I think we intuitively know that the good stuff is living in reps' heads, which is why so often sales leads are still slacking reps. Hey, what's going on with the deal with so-and-so? Like if AI had solved it and conversational intelligence had solved it, you wouldn't be getting those slacks. But we intuitively know like reps understand the deal in a way maybe your dashboard doesn't. They're stitching together details like what happened 3 calls ago, what the champion said versus what they implied, where procurement is stuck, that the rep actually gets it. The problem is when they leave, their deal understanding goes with them too. Or if they're stretched across 10 deals, their ability to juggle all those details and keep their understanding, a firm grip on those deals also starts to break down. And so there's a lot of weight relying on the rep. And the result is that people end up flying blind. Even your AI doesn't have a real idea of what's happening. So on the AI side, you get this blindness, but just faster. The follow-up emails sound like every other email just in the buyer's inbox because the AI just read a transcript. It doesn't actually know the deal. Or the coaching insights you get, like how many of you have had coaching insights from a conversational intelligence tool that are just like very obvious because the AI saw a signal, but it didn't give you like an actual framework. It doesn't tell you what it means for your deals or why you win. So all that to say, despite having thousands of tools out in the market and many of us having bought sales tools, you're not seeing a real memory, a real sense of like cohesive understanding of why you win deals in that everyone can access, including your AI. So we solved for the visibility crisis, but what we actually needed was understanding. So we knew that when we set out to build Sybill, we knew we needed to build something different, that if we just layered AI on top of a database, you were going to hit a ceiling really fast. We'll share more on that in a bit, that we'd be no better than just a generic AI. Technically, you get a response, but it's very practically generic. It's not specific insights to your deals. So we wanted to build an understanding layer, something that your stack could actually be built on, one cohesive understanding of why you win.
Yeah. And essentially, we landed on this specific insight like 2 years ago when they were trying to move away from a single call insight to actually a deal level insight. And like, what is it that really cohesive, like makes a deal cohesive across conversation and across interactions with the customer and within the customer? And there is uh, like what we found is there's so much variation from company to company on what an ideal deal looks like that without understanding for each company that ideal deal process, you cannot really answer questions on how likely is this deal to close, who are going to be the champions, who are going to be the detractors, and so on and so forth. So when we built our intelligence layer, we eventually landed on 3 separate pieces. And I want to talk quickly about each of these. So first is context graphs. The concept of context graphs essentially means that you can actually link every single entity in your database. So that could be a deal, it could be an account or a prospect or even a team member to other relevant entities via a node that says, okay, this rep is owning this deal or this prospect is economic buyer for this account. This context graph we have built within Sybill for every customer. And what it does is it connects every deal, every prospect, every competitive mention across all of your calls over a period of time. So it's almost like a network of information that is built up with new interactions with new data. And this helps you figure out which objections are actually killing deals versus which ones are just noise. It knows how your team is winning certain deals against which competitors, so on and so forth. The second piece of what we do very uniquely is based on learnings from every deal and every new outcome and what new product lines are. We are continuously learning an institutional memory of what's the ideal deal process, what is the company pricing, what is the packaging, what product lines are getting shipped, what is the ramp process itself. And then the third piece we are really building into the product is basically this concept of feedback loops. Imagine a rep sends an email or asks AI to write an email and then sends a slightly different version of that email. The gap between the two helps learn the preferences for the rep. Every CRM field, if it is edited with an override, that is a correction that the Sybill is learning from and it's updating the system. So every new close deal, every new AI edit essentially helps feed back into the existing context graph and into the memory itself. So when you do this, repeat this thing for the 10th time, it already knows the last 9 times that you learned from and it does not make that mistake. And because these layers are talking to each other, if you're launching a new product, let's say, and or a new competitor comes into your deals, Sybill is automatically learning which that competitor is. It's learning the objection handling against that specific competitor. It's able to tailor emails or deck or dashboards with that new information. And that information is that intelligence layer is what the infrastructure on top is built about. And we call this the compounding intelligence. So it's not a single tool that you configure and pray your team adopts. It's a system that will get more smarter the more the team uses it. So, for example, on day one, we are capturing all interactions. So it is handling things that your rep shouldn't be wasting time on. So that could be your CRM updates, it could be follow-ups, meeting preps, but that's table stakes today. After about our first month or so, it has actually learned each rep's preferences, not just what your playbook should say about what they do, but actually how are they doing it? What is their way of handling procurement versus another rep? And what kind of email do they like to write? And the emails doesn't sound like AI anymore. That sounds specifically to them, like someone wants to write a curt formal email versus someone wants to be very casual. So that becomes very, very prominent. At the end of a quarter, it knows it has seen patterns of deals across a stack that are won and that are lost. And it has seen messaging, which is getting you to the next conversation, which helps get over objections. Where are certain deals stalling? So this piece, especially at around quarter one, is where we are capturing that compounding intelligence for an organization. And these patterns get shared across the org. So anytime you're asking Sybill, it's not simply your best rep that is closing a ton of deals with this information results. It's actually flowing to everyone in the organization. And then after a few months, or we call it year one, a single rep that is joining the company, or even if you have an AI agent that is plugging into the system, it will have a full year of institutional memory. So every single deal follow up, every single forecast on that deal, every new rep ramp, they are basically starting from everything that the team has already taught the system autonomously via activity that is happening on the platform. And this powers all of the AI workflows that you're building, your team that's doing certain things, and also like agents and SaaS tooling. This is different from like what every other SaaS tooling is. Like your every workflow starts from scratch, every automation is built from scratch. And if you're building 10 automations, the 10th one cost exactly the same amount of time as the first one to get it exactly right. And that's what we believe the difference comes when you're building the intelligence within the platform. And this was a big unlock for Sybill. This is why some of the examples we're going to show today on how you can use Sybill are really powerful in what they do. Collin, I'm going to
All right.
kick it back to you for showing a few examples.
Yeah, let's do it. We'll try to get into just product and actually show you how this stuff works. All right. So this whole foundation that Gorish and I talked about, it kind of unlocks two things. One, deal intelligence, where you can actually know what's happening in your deals. This is inspection, forecasting, coaching, the things that the kind of insight that we were wanting all along with visibility. And then execution. What can your reps and team actually do to move a deal forward? I'm going to try to show you some product demos based on kind of both arms of that. So understanding and then actual execution. So here's a very basic prompt that I ran in Sybill this morning, and you'll actually see my iterations on it. I asked Sybill, I said, look at all of our active deals, which 5 are most at risk and what needs to be done about them. So it quickly pulled out this action plan surfacing the 5 deals. So you have the deal, you have its owner, you have the main risk factors. I want to just even draw attention to some of the specificity here. It highlights that the champion here has limited authority. They actually can't really drive the decision on their own related to that. There's not executive engagement in this deal, and economic buyers and senior stakeholders are just not highly involved. And so as you would expect, that becomes like one of the main outputs of what this rep is being asked to do is let's map those stakeholders and let's find a way to actually bring them into the deal. They're also evaluating sales loft and Clary. And so a big need here is showing the value of Sybill as a Gong replacement. Like, why should they make that jump? Why should they learn a whole new stack? Now, I thought this was helpful, but this is also like a lot of text. And what if you want to just kind of have a pulse on like how many of our deals are at risk? So from there, I asked Sybill to create a risk dashboard, and could it show me which deals are at risk, deals by rep, the top 5 most urgent deal actions. And it quickly produced this dashboard for me where I could see, all right, Sybill's flagging that 24 of our active deals are at risk, a total of $545,000 in pipeline. It's slotting 5 of them as critical, 11 as high, and then 8 as medium risk. And as I drill into this, I can see kind of what stages that risk is coming up. Obviously, a lot of them are very late stage. We could see, like looking at individual reps, how many deals are at risk for those reps, the total value broken down by those reps, and then some of the urgent actions. From there, I was like, I want to iterate on this and make it a little bit tighter. So I asked, hey, can you make it where I hover over the dashboard and I can see which deals are at risk, and also in the rep view, show their assigned and urgent tasks. So like in the rep view, for example, I'm able to get more of a broken up idea of like what the actual tasks are for every single rep. So again, this is like towing that line from getting that intelligence, what's actually happening in our deals, and then quickly moving it into execution. So based on some of these deal risks that came up, I ran a few other prompts in Sybill. One of those was, we talked about that Kate's working a deal where right now the champion has really limited authority. I asked, hey, could you draft a multi-threading plan with specific recommendations to get the decision makers engaged in the buying process? And so Sybill gave me a really in-depth plan on what could Kate do to take where we have this really enthusiastic champion and start to move them into, bring in more decision makers into the orbit of the deal. To do a breakdown of the deal where it's kind of currently at, and a multi-phased approach. Like, so obviously starting with the champion that she has now, moving into trying to act a recovery call with them, value alignment, champion enablement. Then actually, how do we start getting it? The reason I recommended this is we've used this to close deals before, where we'll reach out to a company's CRO and kind of nudge them into the deal. And then they actually get in conversation with the AE, because the reality is a lot of times CROs just listen to other CROs. They're not wanting to take time with an AE. And from there, let's get into the execution. Hey, can you draft me the first email that Kate should send to the AE to get this moving? And then it immediately pulled up the AE within the to column. It CC'd Nishit, because historically we've brought in Nishit on a number of these deals. So it knows our winning behaviors, and then drafted a message to this AE about how could we move this forward and try to bring in, like it gave 3 specific recommendations of building the business case together, engagement with the decision makers, and then a paid pilot proposal. So that's, again, one risk that we could trace all the way through to how do you actually execute on it. Another one that, as I mentioned, is we compete against Gong a lot. I've earned a little bit of reputation for talking about this. And so I said, hey, Matt has this deal where the prospect is evaluating us against Gong. Use his conversations, like their specific pain points, to build a business case for replacing Gong with Sybill. So again, Sybill created this executive summary, working down into specific challenges, a breakdown of the business case for why this prospect should replace Gong with Sybill. And these are very specifically their pain points. Like, we don't market all the time like, hey, make your call recording reliable, or we don't talk about duplicate data entry that very often. That is something we solve for, but those are specific pain points that this account has brought up. And Sybill was able to, with that context it has on this deal, bring it and its context on how we win, bring that to bear on a actual business case. But that's a lot to read. No one wants to read all that. So here's the actual deck that Sybill created. Here are the specific challenges that they brought up, and it could map through, here are the issues into how Sybill could actually solve them. Again, all very much steeped in the specific problems that this account brought up. Now, one that I didn't share with you all earlier was another dashboard we're really liking. It's just building an ICP dashboard in Sybill, which again, it can only really know that if it knows why we win. And so we ran this prompt, pull all close won deals from last 6 months for each deal, do a thorough analysis, and build a detailed ICP dashboard. And so this is the dashboard that Sybill spun up, where we can see the deals that were closed, average deal size, deal cycle. We get idea of the industry, the company size breakdown, and we can click into individual like psychographics, like who are the personas who are showing up, what percentage are they showing up, all really based in the context that we've built with Sybill over time. Sybill's gotten smarter, understands our business model over time in a way that if you tried to pull all this out of Gorish, I'm sure you could. It would take a long time or out of our reps. All of it is living in Sybill in a way that far exceeds what we could do with it. All right. We have some other really smart folks on this call who are using Sybill. So we should move over to them. I think Meredith,
Yes.
you're up first.
And thank you so much, Collin. I think this is very, very exciting. I want to bring in two people that actually are living this every single day. So first is Meredith. Many of you know her as head of sales at Aligned. She is also running their entire CS org. Before that, Meredith actually has built and scaled sales team at Captivate IQ and Spiff, both successful exits, and she has been on 30 Minutes to President's Club breaking down how she does her magic. Honestly, one of the sharpest tactical sales leader I know, and she's a Sybill power user. Meredith, show them what you've built so far.
Wow, what an intro. I hope I can live up to just a sliver of that hype, and sorry to come out of the gates disappointing. I was actually hoping Elaine could start because one of my prompts is still loading here.
That's completely fine. Now, I do want to introduce Elaine because I met her first time 5 years ago when I was starting Sybill. Elaine, ladies and gentlemen, is the co-founder and CRO of Tofu. She, as I shared, was an investor previously at Signalfire. Also, before that, she has ran product marketing at Slack. She is a Stanford alum. And honestly, she's one of those people that I learned the most from about GTM. And she's amazing because she has seen this from every single angle, like an operator, a founder, an investor, and Elaine also happens to be one of our earliest customers and biggest champions. So Elaine, take it away.
Thank you, Gorish. And I always joke, you can rip out pretty much any other tool from me, but you cannot take out Sybill. That's like the one tool. Claude Code is now coming in short number 2, but that's the one tool you cannot take away from me. I'm going to show you a bunch of stuff and the ways that I actually use this on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. I do a ton of scheduled stuff. So for me, my day is super chaotic. I want things on a certain schedule, just sent either in Slack or email. I do a lot in email because Slack gets a bit noisy for me. And I'm going to show you real data. So I, as I mentioned, do a ton of saved prompts. So if you guys have not taken advantage of this before, this is going to be the best place ever for you. We actually do a ton of team prompts here, but you can see I have a bunch of things that are set up on various types of schedules. So I have one that every single Monday morning, it goes through every single open opportunity, and it's 2 bullet points. It is literally just what is the single next step that we should take and what is the biggest risk to this deal. And then when I get an email about it, I ran this before, so you can kind of see how it goes. You can see here that it's giving me real simple information. Next step, biggest risk. And I go through this and just kind of like gut check some of the things. And then I also will use this in our sales meetings just to make sure people are actually doing what they're saying they're supposed to be doing. So this is kind of like my high level gut check on like every single open deal. And I ask it for 2 bullet points because, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff in here. And this is my 10,000 foot view. Similarly, I have a few other ones that I run. So I do every 60 days, I run a prompt around most common objections, most common competitive situations we're running into, and then any of the feature requests. So same thing, it's going to get sent to my inbox. So here's the common objections, competitive situations. I also ask it to tell me where we're winning and where we're losing. So some things that we might want to go and make sure we're investing in. This is long, as you can see, and like this is a lot of reading, and I'm lazy and I'm busy. So what did I do with this? I actually put this into Claude. I'm using Sybill's MCP server in Claude. So now Claude can go and talk to all of this data. And I'm a very visual person. So what did I have it do? I had it go and build me a very visual dashboard. And this updates every 60 days. So when I get that email in my inbox, this is going to update as well. You can see very visual for me to understand what does the competitive landscape look like? Why are we losing deals? So for me, this is like a flag like, okay, bad timing and no budget. Well, that's a qualification issue. That should happen super early. So I want to make sure that the deals that are falling into this bucket, we're killing really fast. And if we're not, that's something I have to address. Same thing, most requested features. This is really useful data that we send to our product team, right? We're making decisions constantly of where we invest time and money. I want to make sure this is all grounded in fact from actual sales calls. And then here, you can see some of the other objections we sometimes hear, and then it also is flagging which customers had those objections. And then it'll also give me a little breakdown of like by deal owner and kind of what the key blockers were on that. So this one's kind of like my more, how do I interface with the product and engineering teams, and how do I look at some of the reasons why things are either not moving forward or where we're running into competition. Another one of my favorite prompts that I use is this one's going to be a beast. So this is my weekly comprehensive update on every single new deal that was created in the past 7 days, including source information on if they said something in the calls on where did they hear about us, any information they shared on the calls related to their pain points, why they're talking to us, any other competition they're looking at, any features that they're really requesting or things like that. So this one, as you can see in my inbox, so it's going to go through summary. So this is like high level, what happened, each of the deals, the source, the like information, who's on the call, what were the main use cases. I'm actually using this a ton right now because we have a product that can do a lot of things, and really honing in on where are we seeing the most common use cases and pattern matching on that is really great. Risks, tangible next steps to close the deal. So this actually we pull up in our deal review when we're going through some of the later stage. And just like I did with the other dashboard, here I build that for myself in a very visual style. So I can kind of visually see in these different buckets what needs attention, where we're seeing strong pipeline versus potentially weaker. And then it's got a cool little heat map of things around some of the risks. So where we're seeing certain competition, where there's potentially budget that we haven't identified, any timelines that are really lagging behind, and then a breakdown by every single deal. So that's some of the things that I'm creating here. One of the last ones that I'll kind of show that I think is probably my favorite, or at least our sales team's favorite. So I'm going to actually walk you through what I do here. We automate this, but I wanted to create one in real time for you. So I had built a skill that is a business value case creator. So kind of like what you saw Collin being able to do, but I want it in our branded template. I know exactly how I want it to be formulated. So I gave it a finished doc that we had done by hand saying, hey, here's exactly what we want you to do. And here's our logos, colors, fonts, all of that, and package it up into a skill. Now, we automate this when a deal hits a certain stage. So for us, it's very mid-funnel evaluating stage. We take all of the call data and we turn it into this business value case. So it's going to go and pull all of the data from Sybill. And then here, it's going to go and deliver this in Slack. So here, I now have a business value case that we will go and hand directly to the AE who passes it to the champion. So this makes us look way bigger than we are, way more professional. It's going to go through all the things we care about. And now this customer, again, feels like we really have our stuff buttoned up. So being able to automate it on a certain schedule where deal hits this stage, this triggers this is kind of how we're running that. Couple other use cases just as a leader is I also have it prep me for my day. So this is less to do with moving deals along, but in a given day, I have customer calls back to back with sales calls, back to back with, like a QBR. I want to make sure that I'm prepped fully for that. So this is another thing that runs on a daily basis where you can see here's my prep. So I'll just show you like one example, but here I had a customer call this morning. It's going to go and give me the agenda, past interactions and data like that. And this is just really helpful for me when I'm going back to back and just constantly context switching. I don't have to go in and query. Sometimes I'll query Sybill saying, show me the latest on this company or what were we supposed to talk about or things like that. But having this daily brief in my inbox is extremely valuable. So I'll stop talking and answer any questions people have and then can pass the baton over to Meredith. I call it ruthless prioritization. And if anybody on the call wants to know how I built any of that stuff in Claude 2, I'm always happy to share some of that.
That was really incredible. I have a million questions. I will be following up with you. So thanks so much for sharing. I'm currently head of sales and interim head of CS at Align. So a lot of my responsibilities include reporting up, which I heavily use Sybill for, but then also in the day-to-day coaching perspective. So I'm going to share some examples there. I think the most recent use case I had, and I don't know who else can relate on the call, but having a C-suite, go into a board meeting and they're prepping and things are coming up very last minute. And then it trickles down last minute. A few days ago, I got a very late night ping. Hey, I'm wrapping up the board deck. I need this very specific ask. And I had a mini panic moment. It's 10:30 at night. How am I going to gather all of this? The C-suite had pinged me. We need to know the specific talk tracks that are resonating, the top objections, and why people are buying Aligned versus X competitor. And so I copy pasted that request from Slack and put it right in Sybill. And it was able to help me subside my panic a little bit. I ran it in Sybill. It came up with so many different responses, right? So the core value propositions, what are the talking points that are resonating the most, the objections. I was able to compile all of this for my C-suite, who was able to get it to his board within a matter of hours. And when you're in those types of situations, hours can really make or break a presentation and how you're perceived as a company as a whole. And so Sybill definitely saved me here. But then we took a lot of these, and then with Claude, we made them into actual competitor cards. So again, doing a lot of the heavy lifting with Sybill and then just taking it the extra mile with AI to really to fully customize and build out the rest of our playbook. So taking a lot of the stuff here. And then I always like to ask for very specific examples. So it's nice that we have these overall themes and things that come up, but I like to pull specific quotes. So I might do that from time to time and then put those in the insights as well. And then another thing that we'll do, similar to Elaine, again, I need to get on your level of what's the most common objection. I love the report idea. But then what we do when we're ramping reps is we'll look for these themes. And so I'll go across the reps as a whole, right? So what's the biggest coaching advice that I can give such and such rep based on his Q1 deals? And so it'll give a really detailed, comprehensive analysis of all of the deals. And then I'll click into those individual deals. And I still am really big in the heavy coaching aspect. And so I'll have the reps self-assess their own calls first. And so you can see here, they're leaving comments for themselves still of like, hey, I thought this was a good quantification, and then I'll get to layer on top. So even though Sybill still does a fantastic job with the overarching themes with AI, still going into the specifics and being able to leave those comments and work with them in tandem, I find still super valuable as well. Any questions on what I've shown so far?
Meredith, how are you actively working with your reps to coach them based on this data?
So Sybill will pull most of the overarching themes, right? So if I ask what's the biggest coaching opportunity, it will say stop, here it says stop progressing deals without an economic buyer engagement. So then when I'm asking them to watch their own individual calls, they'll leave me the comments with this in mind and I'll layer on top. And then I might run this prompt again. Okay, are we still seeing this theme in the calls? Has this theme improved since we discussed it Q1? So that way you can monitor the progress on kind of a week over week, monthly basis. And then we're still doing a lot of the prompts that Elaine talked about too. So what are the product feedbacks? And then we'll auto shoot that over to product. Because I also oversee CS as well, we'll ask prompts such as, how is the handoff process between the two orgs going? What are rooms for improvement there as well? And so before we had Sybill, I'll actually go back to Collin's point earlier. Collin, you were saying that AI might even in some aspects be faster. I didn't find that to be the case. So because we had to readjust the prompts so many times because they were not fine-tuned the way Sybill is, I spent so much time correcting the prompts. So in the end, it really wasn't faster at all. And that's ultimately a big piece of what had us move forward with Sybill in the end is just you tell it once, it pulls exactly what you need, it learns from that, and you don't have to keep teaching it the way you do with these other AI tools.
There was a question in
You
there.
know,
I don't know if this is something a use case you're doing, Meredith, but Tim asks, like, how do you turn Sybill coaching advice into a doc or into something that the rep can reference? And so is there any ways that you're kind of facilitating? It sounds like you're doing that in your check-in, like this becomes like something you can run in Sybill and ask about, hey, are they applying this piece of feedback? Or you can make it an agenda item in your one-on-one.
Yeah, that's a great call out. We should build out a specific asset actually, Tim. So thank you for surfacing that because right now we do just have it in the one-on-one doc. So each week reps are expected to come having run their own AI prompts on what's my biggest coaching opportunity if we haven't already identified it, or they're supposed to run one or two prompts on their own and then self-assess one or two of their own calls before I assess it on top. And so then we document it in the one-on-one on an ongoing basis. But you're right, we should create a rubric. And it sounds like a good task for Claude, or I'm sure Elaine's already built that part out.
Yeah, Elaine showed a lot of her scheduled prompts that she has running, and that's more from like an executive view. But a rep can do this same thing too, where they can have a recurring prompt that runs on Monday and say, hey, take the feedback that Meredith gave me in our one-on-one last week and look at all my deals that I worked this week. Where did I improve? Where do I still need to improve? Like there's a way that they can even also schedule out this kind of feedback without having to go chase it. It could be a filter that they're running across all of their deals and have scheduled on the run.
That's a great add too. They are doing that. So in our team meeting, so separate from the one-on-one, we have a wins section where we share, if you didn't close a deal, what's something that progressed deals forward. And so even just yesterday, a rep shared, I ran this prompt. The rest of you should run it because it identified this deal is stalling. And then Sybill gave me the very next step that I need to do to uninstall the deal. So I also like seeing them get creative with their own prompts as well, because the Sybill templates, and I can build out as many templates as I want, but you also want the reps to be creative too. So they're trying out their own talk tracks constantly, right? The best reps are always tweaking their own scripts. So I like giving them the flexibility to ask those one-off questions of like, okay, I tried this specific language, or like, how did it go this week when I tried this aspect? Because then they get to be creative and they're more bought into the tool and the process altogether.
Totally. Well,
right.
Elaine has started to hint at this a little bit, and that she started to show how she's using both Sybill and Claude together. And we kind of hinted at a bit that if you just take AI that doesn't have context, you're not going to get outputs that you're excited about. Meredith, you hinted at this too, where it's like having to prompt and prompt and prompt. So if you just dump transcripts into chat or Claude, that's not going to get you there. But if you actually bring Sybill's intelligence into Claude, there's some really killer ways that you can use it. So Gorish, I think you had one that you were going to show before we wrap.
Yeah, there's one thing which I'm very excited to share. So essentially a few weeks back, we actually tried to build Sybill outside of Sybill with API calls and HubSpot MCPs and whatnot. Now, we all know that Claude is incredibly capable and powerful, but on its own, when it's given this large corpus of data, it does hit a ceiling and it does hit it fast. And the interesting aspect is many of the times it doesn't even know that it has hit that ceiling or it has run into that loop. And I'll show one small example of where that comes across. I think this would be enlightening for a lot of people. And it was definitely for me when we first did this. So we all knew in 2023, LLMs had a big challenge with hallucination. And over the last 2 years, LLMs seem to have gotten much better, so hallucination seems to have gone. But let me show you one example of where we still see things like Claude fail a lot and fail spectacularly. So over here, I'm asking Claude. Now, this has access to calls, converse, emails, HubSpot deals, and a bunch of other things. It doesn't have access yet to Sybill's MCP server. So I asked Claude to look at closed loss deals from HubSpot since the last 9 months. And for each of those deals, go through the specific nature of the conversational emails captured. And what I'm trying to ask it is to generate a detailed report on the pain points and the buyer's journey based on that analysis. So it goes through the entire journey. So it looks at CRM objects, it finds certain calls from there, also has a scale that it reads. And then what it generates is a report, which is what you would have seen in Claude. Now, this feels like a pretty comprehensive report. Let me show you. Okay, so a big report, about 31 pages, summarizes all of closed loss deals from HubSpot CRM over the last 9 months, over 366 total closed loss deals in the period, 200 hours substantive Sybill conversations. Again, builds a big aggregate loss pattern analysis, beautiful looking report. Now, I asked Claude, sorry, a follow-up question. Wait, but how many closed loss deals did you actually analyze? Did you interpolate the findings? Please share your original data set that you were supposed to go through versus what you actually went through. So I'm asking Claude a follow-up question on how many deals did I actually look at and what was the data set that it went through. Imagine what we find. So what you asked for, go through all closed loss deals over the last 9 months, 366 total per HubSpot. For each deals, examine conversational email and Sybill with economic buyer. What I actually did, HubSpot pull retrieved 200 out of 366 deals, only page one. I never fetched page two. So it never went to the 166 deals that it completely missed out. That's okay. Sybill deep dive, that I only called Sybill connector for 4 deals. So out of the 200 that it looked at, it only actually deep dive into 4 specific deals. And then for the rest of the deals, it essentially interpolated the aggregate statistics from this curated data set. So 96 out of 200 deals, it was basically interpolating from that statistics versus going through each of the deals that it should have gone through. Now, comparing that to Sybill, what we are looking at is a much more different value set. So we were looking at like total deals where we had discovery conversation was 103. So Sybill actually looked at all of the deals versus only 4 deals. And that was a big gap because for this report looks so good in general that it's hard to imagine why this would fail. Right? The visual of it is just so accurate. And it goes deal by deal. But it did not go into the conversation level details for beyond 4 deals. Versus if you were to look at the output, really, where it's not interpolating data, where it's not estimating data, it's actual real life data, that looks way different than the one which you just saw. I just wanted to highlight this one example of sometimes the output that you get looks very pleasing, but actually if you go through the reasoning, you'll find that there is a lot of depth to what that output should have looked like. And LLMs are great at fooling humans into sharing something which looks real, but many of the times may not be. So
I like your emphasis on the details too, because what I saw when looking at other tools or just AI in general is it will give you that overview, but it doesn't give you the nitty gritty that you're pointing out here, Gorish, the specifics. And that's how us as sales leaders actually implement change. Like there is a difference from knowing an overall theme to knowing exactly what the customer said and exactly how the rep responded. And it can be just changing slightly the positioning that unlocks all the difference.
Yeah, 100%. And that makes the difference between like potentially getting that deal over the line versus losing that deal entirely. And sometimes it's that single change that you want to be aware of and take into control. Without that intelligence layer, you're basically asking Claude to reconstruct an entire intelligence in real time, which is practically impossible for an LLM, because even the best LLMs today just have a million token context window, which is essentially 20 calls if you think about it. So beyond 20 calls, it cannot even look at the data in one single flow. And that's the extended context window. I have probably one more slide to go. Okay, so like you just watched a multitude of workflows with Collin, with Elaine, what she has built out, extremely cool, and how Meredith does coaching and enablement for her team. Nobody amongst any of us is rebuilding context, is rebuilding intelligence. Nobody, we're not starting from scratch. That is one of the biggest economics of having an intelligence layer, without which every single workflow would have to start from zero, and it costs the exact same amount to start that workflow. With context infra, the economics is essentially flipping, because we are basically building context from interactions, and then we are trying to ask the AI to do certain things. Your AI essentially is inheriting everything from what it has done and learned in the past. And that is like, think of it as building a library and an asset. And what we see in practice is reps are able to manage 3 to 4 times more pipeline, because their follow-ups is done via AI in a way where they don't have to carry the context in their heads. Win rates are going up by 10%. We have had new reps ramp up 50% faster, because they can simply ask AI on what I'm not doing, which other reps are doing, and they get the power of the full context graph. Forecasting becomes very accurate. CRM fill rate becomes 100%. And this is like, for us, this is not a productivity gap. All of these compounded signals, what we are seeing is that revenue per rep is going up effectively, while the effort per rep, especially effort on mundane tasks, is going down. And this compounds over a period of time, because every deal that your rep is running is making the system smarter for the next one. So when your board asks for AI ROI, this is what the answer should be, not just token consumption. It's like, how do you use the activity and the interaction to actually compound the intelligence in return? In the last, I want to leave you with one last picture. Essentially, imagine a one-day pipeline review. You walk in, you already know which deals decayed over the last week, which commitments were unmet, which stakeholders went cold. And that is not because you have spent, or your ops person has spent a lot of time for hounding the rep to get that answer, but because Sybill already knew the answer before you had to go talk to someone. What I want you to leave with is your AI really getting smarter? Is your 10th workflow better than the first? Is there an institutional knowledge which you're accumulating, kind of like the skills framework that Elaine has built out? Or is it like every single time that you're trying to prompt AI, you have to add in all of the context, you have to add in all of the playbooks, and you start from essentially day one? If that's not happening, you are essentially not using AI. If you are able to compound that intelligence, you're basically building an institutional memory, which downstream humans and AI would be able to use.
All right. Well, I recognize we are at time, overtime. So thank you specifically to Meredith and Elaine for giving your use cases and kind of peeling back the curtain on how you're using Sybill. Gorish and I can hang for a minute, or at least I can. I don't know about your time, Gorish. I can hang for a minute too if any questions come up. But otherwise, thank you to everyone for joining us. And yeah, enjoy your beautiful, what is it? Wednesday. I lost track of what day it was. Happy Wednesday. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks, Ken. All right.
I love how Elaine has named her Sybill assistant as Smarter Alter Ego.
Smarter Alter Ego. I like it too. All right. I don't see any questions coming through.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.